Good morning to you. It is Pensions Awareness Live. How are you and are you ready for pensions? We all should be. Pensions are so important, but they're also super boring. So thank you so much for logging into this while I and the Pension Geeks try and take you on a bit of a journey over the next 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, and a big bit of Q&A. And this morning right now we're going to cover a session called Pensions in a Nutshell. I love pensions, obviously that's what my cup says. I've got a little sticker that says that as well. But this is all about pensions awareness. And so my name's James and I am a pension geek. And let me just quickly, for a very brief moment, explain what the Geeks are about. Johnny and Rachel set the Geeks up 7 years ago. They established Pensions Awareness Day in 2014, and Pensions Awareness Day is tomorrow. But we've turned it into a week-long extravaganza of retirement-related fun, okay? And the Pension Geeks are on a mission to improve your final retirement position. This is a not-for-profit entity this week. All these events are being funded by some great supporters. We've got a partner in Now Pensions. We've got sponsors Aegon and Royal London. And behind the scenes, we've got an amazing group of people. Let's hear you. Do you know what? That's not bad for the first session. You're going to have to do better than that the next time round, but I'm pretty happy with that. So for the next 10 minutes or so, I'm just going to talk you through pensions in a nutshell. And it is a right old roller coaster journey of everything to do with pensions. And if it triggers in your mind a couple of questions that you want to ask, that's great. Get involved, properly involved, because this is all about you and your money and your journey to a perfect outcome with you and your family and your loved ones. So it is possible for you to fire questions in as we go. So the Geeks, we're doing this from a studio this week because we've always taken a double-decker bus or a camper van out on the road and gone to visit city centres so we can see you in person. We understand right now, with the state that the world is in, that that's probably not the most clever thing to do, which is why we're doing it in this film studio today. We'd normally be giving you out super-duper little wristbands, Pensions Awareness Day. We'd be normally giving out geek glasses, which is pretty rude because they're just like my own. Hang on, can't even do that. Let's get them on. But no glass, okay? So just like my own. And for the very, very best question, we have some Golden Geek glasses. Come on, let's have a woo for Golden Geek glasses. That's not bad. Actually, that wasn't as good as the first one. So if you ask a brilliant question, or more than one over the course of today and the rest of the week, then we will find you and we're going to deliver to you a unique, there's only one set of these in existence, pair of Golden Geek glasses. And just one last point before I kick off on the pensions in a nutshell. Why is it September the 15th? I love this story. Johnny and Rachel set up the Geeks and established Pensions Awareness Day in 2014, and they chose a random date. It's the 15th of September because that's the day that Johnny's dad first started to draw his Merchant Navy pension scheme. Okay, I love that story. That's just makes it super emotional and real. Okay, so here we go then. Are we all ready? Pensions in a nutshell. So if we go back over 40 or 50 years and talked about pensions and every single detail about them, I'd be here for about 10 hours. You don't want that. They don't want that. I don't want that. So let's see if we can do it really quickly in sort of bite-sized chunks. But pensions generally fall into, in my mind, fall into three groups, okay? We'll talk about ones that are promised, we'll talk about ones that are guaranteed, and we'll talk about ones that you have to fund. Okay, let's start over here with the ones that are promised. This is the state pension. So we all pay national insurance. Our national insurance contributions go towards generally keeping the country going, NHS, home services and all that sort of stuff. But in addition, it helps fund your state retirement pension. Now that has changed significantly over the years because guess what? We keep living longer. Now I like that idea myself personally, but it does mean that there's a challenge on the state to continually pay state pensions. So the way that they've made it more sustainable is made the odd tweak over the years. The current state of affairs is if you can pay national insurance for 35 years, doesn't have to be consecutive, cumulative 35, then you will get a full state pension. In today's money, that's worth about $9,100. There are all sorts of variations from legacy journeys that people have been on until this point in time. But right now, I just want to summarise and say about $9 grand a year if you can pay 35 years of national insurance contributions. So my big tip is get a pension forecast. Go to dwp.gov.uk for a pension forecast. Right, that's the first set of pensions. Think of state pensions related questions, fire them into the team. Johnny's going to join me on stage and we'll do a Q&A at the end. The second clump of pensions is guaranteed pensions. Now, these often exist in the workplace. They go back some years. It used to be the only type of pension that existed in the workplace until about the mid-1980s. And I'm talking about final salary pension schemes here. And they also fall into different categories. So there's public sector ones, which is pretty much funded by the government and the taxpayer. And then there's private sector ones where the employer helps fund the promise. But in a final salary scheme, often referred to as a defined benefit scheme, what happens is the number of years of service that you work as a fraction times your final salary determines a guaranteed outcome. And the assets versus liabilities investments, that is a risk and a responsibility borne by your employer and not you. So generally speaking, you start building up an entitlement to a promise of income at the end. So let's just say the fraction that is used is an 80th. This is pretty common. And you work in your final salary scheme for 40 years, you get 40 80ths. Easy maths for all of us, right? 40 80ths is 50%. If your final salary was 30 grand, then 50% of 30 grand is £15,000 per annum, normally index linked for life and payable at 50% of that level to your spouse if you predecease your spouse or partner. That is a final salary scheme, often referred to as defined benefit. Okay, so bucket number one is promised pensions. There is no pot with your name on it. The government is just going to promise you a pension and it's funded from national insurance contributions. Bucket number two is defined and guaranteed pensions, often called final salary schemes. Doesn't always focus on your final salary, by the way. It could focus on your career average earnings. But you should know that if you've got one of those. And by the way, love them, hug them, hug them, squeeze them, because final salary schemes are pretty rare now, so you need to really, really cherish them if you have them. A lot of people have thought about transferring them, but 9 out of 10 of us probably should retain them as they are because of the guaranteed nature of them. Okay, let's go into the third group of pensions that exist. In the third group of pensions, it's often called defined contribution. There's often a bit of industry jargon calling them money purchase. But here's what I want you to think about. It is just a pot of money with your name on it. And if we were defining all three pots of pension types that you might have exposure to, and we were defining what is a pension, it is just later life pay and income for you. Either your government as a promise, or your employer as a guarantee, or you self-employed as a contractor, or in the workplace building up your own money purchase pot of cash in the third group. That is just your money being deferred until a point in time when you stop work. Okay, so let's concentrate on defined contribution. It's often called defined contribution because that's exactly what happens. You know what is going into the pot. Nothing that comes out of it is guaranteed because the money is invested pretty much in the stock market. So money comes in from you, money comes in from your employer. If you're self-employed, it's really important that you don't miss out on DC pensions. And going forward, I believe the government is trying to bring self-employed people into this arena of auto-enrolment. In the workplace, you will have been auto-enrolled. If you're 22 and you earn over 10 grand a year, you will have been auto-enrolled. So self-employed people, it's really tax efficient for your business for you to fund a pension. But whether you're self-employed or most of us are in the workplace, a workplace pension works like this. You put money in, but you get tax relief. Your employer puts money in. Now, auto-enrolment has insisted that you put in 3% and your employer puts in 5%, so 3 and 5. So there's a total of 8% of your salary going towards pension. Is that enough is a really big question, and I'll touch on that in a moment. So in terms of you and tax relief, the government fully incentivises you to be a pension member, either self-employed or otherwise. And the government will give you basic rate tax relief at source, or you can claim back higher rate tax relief if you are one. Many people in the workplace use something called salary sacrifice or salary exchange or SMART, save more and reduce tax. because that also makes you a small NI saving. That is not tax evasion, that is very clever tax planning, but only available for you in the workplace. So if you're self-employed, probably can't use salary sacrifice, but if you're in the workplace, definitely should be using it. It's a no-brainer. Why does the government incentivise you to have a pension scheme? Very simple. They want you to have income in retirement. If you've got enough income in retirement, you won't turn to the government for more support. If you've got enough income in retirement, you'll spend it. That helps the economy. If you've got enough income in retirement, you'll be taxed, because all income pretty much throughout your whole life is accessible to UK taxation. Apart from the first 12.5 grand that you earn in retirement and beyond, because that is tax-free. So a bit of a pension planning tip here. If you and your partner can have 12,500 each, that's 25 grand tax-free coming into your house beyond retirement age and through to the later life part of your journey. So, how much should you be paying into a pension? I said I'd touch on this earlier. My view, there's 3 or 4 responses to this. Number 1, if you're in the workplace, as much as is required to get the maximum contribution from your employer. And now I go out and I meet employees in the workplace. It's pretty rare to meet them right now, but I do like to meet people in the workplace. And when that happens, if I see someone that says, oh, I'm in a scheme, if I put in 4%, my employer will put in 8. Or if I put in 5%, they'll put in 5. But I'm not doing that, I'm putting in a lesser sum. Here's my view. Put in what you need to put in to get the maximum from your employer. My wife's done the same. In her workplace, if she put in a certain level, the employer would put in this level. And I just said, let's start right there and get the maximum from your employer as we can. There's the first answer. The second answer is as much as you can afford. We don't see people with pension remorse and regret at retirement. We just don't. The only remorse at retirement is people saying, I wish I'd put more in. And I wish I'd met the geeks somewhere on the journey when I was in my 30s or 40s and I'd have put some more money towards retirement. And the sooner you do it and the more you put in, especially if you've been auto-enrolled in your 20s, compound growth means your pot will be as big as it possibly can be the more time that goes in. Okay, the second answer to the question is an actuarial answer. It's half times your age as a percentage of your earnings. Let's just unbundle that. Let's just say you earn 24 grand a year now. You earn 20 grand a year and you're 28, I would say put 14% of your 20 grand a year in. And that 14% is cumulative, your bit, plus the tax relief from the government, plus your employer's contribution. And here's my last answer. An industry perceived bit of logic is a mid-teens percentage. So not a million miles away from the 14 number that I just came up with earlier. And if you could commit to both you and your employer cumulatively getting to 15% or 14 or 15% per annum, you stand a really good chance of your pension being a success. Now, your pension will be a success as a result of 3 things. How much you put in, how long you do it for, and how well it grows. And what suppresses growth is charges. And we'll talk about charges a bit more if you're joining another session, maybe tomorrow, about combining pension pots. Okay, because if I try to cover that in detail now, you will lose the will to live. Okay, so, and your pension pot will be a success of those 3 or 4 things in harmony, but the biggest factor in determining how big your pension pot will be is how much goes in. So I can't encourage you enough, if you have the scope to do so, to boost your pension contributions. And although it's easy for me to say, try and get yourself to 14 or 15%, you may not be as close to it as you'd like to be. I'm not suggesting that you need to bridge that gap in one big gesture. Why not, as each successive years go by, maybe increase it by 0.5% or 1%. So by the time 4 or 5 or 6 years has gone by, you've got yourself closer to a mid-teens number, but it's not been a painful big one-step effort to do so. And so you start building your pension pot, and when you get to retirement, which is currently age 55, but in 2028 that rises to age 57. Be aware of that fact. But currently, from age 55, you can start to draw your pension. Now, when you draw your pension, it used to be that you had to give the pension fund away. If we're talking about the third group here, where you've defined contribution, built up your own pot of cash, which is your money, remember, it used to be that you'd give that whole pot away to someone within the pensions industry and they would give you an income for life. That was called an annuity. You don't have to do that anymore. That changed in April 2015. I still meet people in the workplace that say, oh, I've got to buy an annuity. You absolutely don't. 9 out of 10 of us, 8 or 9 out of 10 of us, are now not buying an annuity. What that means is that you've now got pension freedoms and choice to do exactly what you want with that fund. That is brilliant, probably more choice than you've ever had before. So let me just quickly summarise pensions in a nutshell. 3 types: promise from the government, guarantee in a final salary format, defined contribution, your pot of money building up like a bank account. You should be able to see this one all the time. You should be registering online, you should get it on your phone and look on your app. You should have an I Love Pension sticker on your phone cover, of course, because that will remind you to have a look every day. But you should face recognition, fingerprint recognition, be able to go in and check the value of your pension fund regularly. Please do that. Please also, when you've logged on, make sure you do a death nomination form. That's another issue where people in the workforce have forgotten to do a death nomination form and haven't told people their pension provider where the money should go if they die before retirement. If you die before retirement, by the way, the whole fund is paid out tax-free. It's the most tax-efficient way for you to draw your pension fund. I'm not endorsing early death, but that is why you need to do a death nomination form. Okay, so pensions in 3 pots: promise from the government, guarantee in the workplace or public sector, defined contribution. Workplace money purchase is way more common right now after auto-enrolment. Of those 3 types, you're building up as much income as you possibly can. You get some tax relief on your contributions. The money's normally invested in here, in this biggest clump over here, which is defined contribution, is invested in a pot, and it's mainly in the stock market. You pay in until you want to draw from it, but you can access it from age 55. Okay, so I think that's what I was going to cover. I said 15 minutes or so. I think we're at sort of 15, 16 minutes or so. I'm just going to give Johnny a 30 seconds warning here to get a prop ready to throw at me because he said he was going to stand there and throw that. So he's going to get ready. So here's my thing about life, right? It is important that you are what you eat. And right now I could do with a little snack. You are what you eat. Nuts, anybody? And you're wondering why walnuts, right? It's because on the promo for this particular session, Pensions in a Nutshell, there was a walnut holding a piggy bank. And so I thought I'd bring some walnuts along today just to do that little gag. I've got another related gag, by the way. Doctor, I can't remove this steering wheel from the front of my trousers. It's driving me nuts. There you go. There's my last nut-related gag. Sorry about that one. I was expecting a big boo from over there.
Is that bad?
It was that bad. Okay, so Pensions in a Nutshell is done. So the format of these sessions, and please join in as many as you can. So at 12:30 today, I'm doing another session called How Much Do I Need to Pay In? How Much Will I Need? At 2:30, Money and Pension Service are doing a session on pension scams. And at 4 o'clock, we've got Aegon running a session called Why Have a Pension Scheme? So get involved, log on. I think you can see in some of the graphics on the screen an opportunity for you to log in, especially in the comments section. But if not, go to the Pensions Awareness Live event website page, and then you can follow the links and sign up for either a one-to-one or more of these sessions next week. But the format of these shows is that 20 minutes in, I'll normally take a slurp of my drink. You'll see a graphic saying Q&A is coming, and then when the graphic goes away, in about 30 seconds time, Johnny and I will do a quick session here answering your questions, because it's all about you. This is your money, this is your event. So let's get your questions as soon as possible involved so that you are part of this as well. So bear with me, quick slurp of tea, maybe recharge your drink. See you and Johnny sitting right there, socially distanced as much as we can be to get in this camera shot and for Q&A. Thank you so much. Okay, we're back for Q&A. Thank you so much for bearing with. I've been joined on the lovely stalls in the studio by head geek Johnny. Let's have a cheer for Johnny.
Hello.
Hooray!
Hello,
there
everybody.
he is. There he is. So Johnny's got all your questions and comments that are flying in, so we can see them. There's loads of them, and thank you so much for getting involved and getting engaged with this. I've just seen a couple at the very top, which is, are these being recorded? Yes, they are, and all of them will be available, won't they, Johnny?
Yep, you can go onto the video library after this, and you can view all the webinars throughout the week. If you can't make any, don't worry, they'll be on there and you can watch them. They'll be on there for a long time to come, so you'll have to go on there and watch them. But what I'd say as well, James, is After this, you'll get emailed the video too once you've attended the webinar, so you can watch it again in your own time. If you need to shoot off now, don't worry. We'll you'll be able to catch up in your own time.
So you came on as we were getting the questions collated here and putting Johnny in place there and getting the microphone on. There was a question immediately that caught our eye, which was someone said, why do I have to wait till age 55 to draw my pension? So here's the answer, right? The government's giving you tax relief and they're incentivising you to save towards retirement. But your side of the bargain is that you can't touch it before you're 55, because what might you do if you could touch it before 55? Well, you might get your hands on it and blow it all. And actually, there's a sort of a contract here. You get a bit of support, the employer puts some money in, but your side of the contract is you don't touch it before 55, because then that will deplete your ability to retire. So that's why not 55. And the reason it's going up to 57 is because we're living longer. And so in 2028, the state pension age jumps from 66, goes up to 66 in October, to 67 in 2028. And then the state pension link to your personal pension will be a 10-year link. So you can't touch your personal pension until 57. Sorry, that was a very long answer. We've got so many questions, I'm trying to keep the answers short.
Let's crack on. Let's see how many we can get done.
So should we grab that one there?
Yeah. Is it how much?
How much would you need to have in a pension pot to retire comfortably? So we are running a session later on today at 12:30 saying how much should I pay in and how much will I need? And brilliantly, to help with that, the Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association has come up with some scenarios about what sort of level of income you might need in retirement. But I'm sort of saying between sort of 15 to 20 grand a year per person. And it neatly links to another question someone asked. I think Imi said, right, so the more I put into my pension, the more I get taxed. Yes and no. You get tax relief at your highest marginal rate, especially if you're in the workplace. You might even get 32% tax relief. So basic rate of 20 and national insurance of 12. So that's 32% tax relief. On the way out, you don't pay tax at all until you're drawing more than 12.5. So it's very, very tax efficient the more your pot is worth, and you can also draw a quarter of it tax free. So my view is build up your pot as big as it possibly can be, and then you can determine how much tax you pay at the far end, because you're in control of what you draw and when. Okay, what else have you got there, Johnny?
I've gone onto the questions page. So is a state pension taxable?
Yeah, all pension income from all sources and mostly all income earned and pension income throughout your whole life is taxable. But as I just said, there's this taxable allowance of 12.5 grand per annum. So here's the strategy in my house. My wife, Melissa, and I, we both want 12.5 grand of income when we've stopped work from our pensions. That's the state and our private. So that's 25 grand coming into our house tax free. Anything we draw on top of that will be taxed, but it's only drawn at 20%. So let's just say I decide to draw 20 grand and 12.5 of it is tax free, 7.5 of it isn't taxed. I only pay £1,500 of tax. So I draw 20 grand from my pension pots, but actually 18.5 of it is net of tax. That is much, much lower rate of tax than we're all paying now in the workplace, and no NI, and we've got access for tax-free cash, and it's had tax-free growth. It is a Barry bargain.
There's another question to go with that. Do I have to work 35 years to get the maximum
state pension? Yeah. And if you've been a high rate taxpayer, could you have paid the necessary NICs for the max state pension before 35 years of work? Okay, really brilliant secondary question there. Yes, you do need to pay 35 years of national insurance. They don't have to be consecutive, and as long as you earn above the threshold, which is about 6.5 grand, then and for a full year, then that year counts. Okay, and so if you've got a counted year, and time as a carer can also count towards this, but if you're in doubt, go to dwp.gov.uk, get yourself a pension forecast and read some of the stuff about your circumstances if you want to know a bit more. The second part of that question was, well, if I was a higher rate taxpayer, do I get to my 35 years quicker? No, you don't. There are bands of earnings, upper and lower, and if your earnings sit within there, you get credited with 1 year. If your earnings go above that as a higher rate taxpayer, you get very little for that. In fact, they tax you 2% above that threshold, even though there's nothing coming for you in that rate. So if you're a higher rate taxpayer, actually, it's not 40%, it's 42%. But that's you helping fund the system, and the state system now at this flat rated £9,100 per annum has brought it down for some higher earners and for people that were entitled to more state pension, but it's risen a whole load more people up to this 9,100 number, and I think that's a good thing. Right, Johnny, what next?
Okay, so many questions, keep them coming, they're great. Can I withdraw 25% of my lump sum later?
This is Gatisha, yeah. Can you withdraw your 25% sum later in life rather than when turning 55? You absolutely can. Now let me be really clear about this age 55 thing. 55 is the earliest you can access it. I'm not suggesting that we should. We probably shouldn't access our pension pots until we've decided to stop work. The 55 thing is important because, as I said earlier, it's your pot of money and you can have a quarter of it tax-free, and so it has helped some people access some of the tax-free cash early. Here's my other tip though, if you really are needing to access your pension pot early, make sure you only draw from the tax-free cash. As soon as you draw £1 of income on top of that, it limits how much you can pay into pensions going forward. And there's lots of people who are accessing them early while still paying in and might continue to pay until your 60s. Be careful of that.
Gish just said another question as well at the bottom.
Does the amount of state pension you receive depend on what you are getting from DC, and are they both taxable? Yes, they are both taxable, and no, it doesn't depend. Generally speaking, it doesn't depend. There is no interplay between your state pension, 9,100, and your DC pot sitting on top. There are some circumstances for people at the lowest earnings threshold in the UK where your DC pension pot may be taken into account if you're being given additional benefits as an offset. But for the majority of us in the workplace, we can be pretty comfortable we're going to get the 9,100 from the state, and our DC pot, our workplace pension, our auto-enrolment scheme, sits on top of that.
Can I just say, James, so everything that we're giving here, it is guidance, isn't it? It's
yeah,
not advice.
absolutely.
It's not advice.
Guidance and support.
Karen's got a good question. She's asking us, I opted out of SERPs about 10 years ago. Was that the right thing to do? But we can't really say yes or no, can we?
Well, we can't really say yes or no, Karen, but I'll give you some factual stuff and information about this. So the first point, Karen, is that opting out of SERPs, a lot of people did it between the late 80s and about 5 or 6 years ago. And it was generally, you weren't giving up your entitlement to state pension, you were giving up your entitlement to the state earnings-related pension, which sits on top of basic. Now, those two bits of pensions have been amalgamated into a single flat state pension, this 9,100, 35 years. So if you contracted out, it could have a small impact on your entitlement after when you retire at 66 currently, okay, or 67. But that's why you need to get a state pension forecast, because it will tell you what your entitlement might be. And it might be, if you contracted out for 10 years, you've got enough national insurance before it, and you're going to pay enough national insurance after it for that contracting out journey that you went on to have zero impact on your final state pension. And I'm saying that with some confidence, not advice, because I also contracted out and I've got my state pension forecast, and me being contracted out for a few years hasn't impacted on it. Hope that helps.
I think it does. We had a few questions about that. One, Sarah's just said a similar thing. Will it impact my state pension? So
possibly not, Sarah. And as recommended by my financial advisor, to be fair to all financial advisors, it was pretty much a compelling argument that you should contract out for at least a decade and a half through the late 80s, early 90s and early noughties. And then there was a sudden change of heart about whether or not you would get value back. There was a bit of debate about it, and eventually the government just said, right, no more contracting out. Let's avoid that debate. Let's just kill that debate. You can't contract out anymore. So everyone is now back in. So I think the question earlier was it the right thing to do, and should I still do it? You've got no choice. We're all now back in. Okay?
Brilliant. I've got a quick question here. Is there a minimum amount? So if I'm going to get a state pension, it might differ from everyone. Is there a minimum amount of time I need to contribute to receive it? Does that make sense?
In terms of
the least amount of time I need to contribute to access the state pension. Say if I'd contributed for 4 years, 5 years, can I access a state pension?
That's a really good point. So then at the moment you have to have paid state pension for 10 years to be entitled to it. Okay. So maximum is 35, minimum is 10. And if you can't get the full 35, then you'll get some proportion of it. So if you get to maybe 17 and a half years, because that's really nice, easy maths for me, you won't get the full state pension, you'll get half of it because you've only paid half of the entitlement of 35 years. Okay.
And guys, behind the camera, if you've got any good questions you can see, shout them out. We'll answer them too. So many.
James has just asked a question here. Is there a limit to lump sum contributions you can put into your pension pot? James, there absolutely is not. And let's be really clear. There is, but let me be clear about that. For most of us, it's not an issue in terms of limitations. And if you're going to transfer some money in from another pension scheme, and a lot of us should be doing that, then that doesn't count towards this limitation. So you can put up to 40 grand a year into pensions, or 100% of your earnings, whichever is the lower. And you can't really build up a pot more than 1.073 million in your lifetime. Now, 1.073 million in your lifetime, that's further down the line. How much you put in now? 40 grand. If your income goes above a certain threshold, which is a very big number, near $250,000, that 40,000 starts to taper down. But for most of us mere mortals, we're not threatened by that £40,000 limit, so you can go for it. If you had a big chunky lump sum and you wanted to put more than 40 grand in, you are allowed to bring forward unused reliefs from the previous 3 years up to 40 grand in each of those years. But you maximise the current year first, and then you bring the furthest one forward from 3 years, then 2 years, then 1 year ago. Hope that helps.
I've got one. There's one from Scott. He wants to know if he was working at a previous employer and had a pension there, how does he bring the pension pot to his current employer, and can you do that?
Yeah, you can do it. It used to be, go back more than 4 or 5 years ago, it used to be you'd have to pay an advisor to do this pretty much, and there might be some transfer penalties, and that's people's biggest fear. So my tip is, yes, you can do it. It is now pretty much free to do. If it's a workplace related scheme, log on. There's normally an opportunity for you to consolidate or transfer in, there should be no exit penalty. Most pensions in the workplace that were established post October 2001 don't have an exit penalty. There's no arrival cost, entry cost, and there's no advisory fee in the middle. So there's a lot of online transfers going on now at no cost, and it's nice and simple and clean, and also in some cases without signature. And so the less we're touching paper and licking envelopes right now, the better that might be as well.
There's one. Okay, we've got a
couple of questions on the chat.
Go on then.
What happens to your state pension and your workplace pension if you move and live abroad for a few years?
Okay, so thank you for that, Rachel. We get asked about moving abroad a lot. You won't be surprised to know that with the change in the weather, it's been a beautiful weekend, by the way, but with the change in the weather that's coming seasonally for us now, there's a lot of people that now have either second homes or they've decided to permanently move abroad. If that is the case, it is entirely possible for you to receive your pensions abroad. There's a lot of people in the UK receiving their state pension in places like Spain or Gibraltar or Cyprus and so on. In many cases, those individuals also retain a UK bank account. So if you've got a personal pension that you started to draw in the UK, it can continue to be paid into your bank account, and you can just transfer the money into euros or dollars or wherever it is you want to be. So the state pension in particular, yes, you can draw it abroad. One thing though, check. If you're going to move abroad, check which countries the state pension index is in, because there are some countries in the world where the UK state pension just remains flat, doesn't go up in line with inflation. But for the majority it will do, and so it's still safe to do so, and it's your money. You can go and move abroad if you wish to. Thank you for that question, Rachel. That was brilliant. Did you one or more? A couple more?
Shout another one out. Go on then.
Why do I have to pay NI after I reach the maximum threshold?
That's a brilliant question. So Rachel's just asked, once I've got to my 35 years of paying national insurance, why do I still have to pay in? That is a super logical thing, right? If you're targeting 35 and you started work at, say, 20, shouldn't you be able to stop paying national insurance at 55? That would be brilliant, really logical, but that's not how it's funded. It's funded on the basis that we all pay national insurance while we're in the workplace, but we stop paying national insurance when we stop earning. Okay, so when we actually retire and we've stopped earning, that's when we stop paying national insurance. It could mean that I worked in a commercial farm from the age of 16. I might pay national insurance for maybe 43 or 44 years. I don't mind necessarily so much, because I know I'm going to get the full state pension doing 35. The extra bit that they took from me is funding it for everybody else.
Any more? I've got a question here.
Further to that question, just
All
about
right.
taking pensions abroad, what about non-British people employed in the UK?
Okay, so non-British people employed in the UK comes up a lot in the workplace, and when we have one-to-ones and meet them all, I absolutely say the same thing. Firstly, you need to be saving something towards retirement for every year of your working life. Secondly, you're going to be auto-enrolled into a pension if you're a UK entitled worker, and so it's important that you understand that this is your pot of money. And so with your workplace pension scheme, you absolutely can transfer it abroad. But my tip is, don't do that until you know where you're going to retire, because there's often some costs in relation to it, and there's there's currency related risk for you potentially as well. But we don't yet have pan-global and pan-European pension schemes, but we're certainly hoping that in the next 5 to 10 or 20 years there will be more easy passporting of pension pots to different parts of the world. But even if you've got a UK pension pot, pension freedoms have now come in that allows you to fully encash it at retirement. So that's your personal pot. The second point was about state pension if you're a non-UK citizen but working here right now. Johnny mentioned earlier, if you pay national insurance for 10 years, then you are entitled to some state pension. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. So that's the key thing there, is if you're a non-UK citizen working here but you pay national insurance for 10 years, yes, you are entitled to something.
There was a great one here. There was, what is the average employer contribution within the UK? So as a workplace, is there an average amount they put into your pension?
There is. The average has come down a little bit because auto-enrolment rules came in 2012, and in auto-enrolment had a requirement from employers to pay either 1, 2 or 3%. We're now at that higher point. It's now 3%. But many employers are now putting 3% into workplace pension schemes, and it's driven the average down a little bit. But from my industry experience, the average in the workplace is around 5 to 6% from an employer. So if you've got an employer that's putting in 5 to 6% on your behalf, brilliant, they're on the average, like that. If they're paying in a bit less, to be honest, it's probably a company that's been forced to do it through auto-enrolment, and that might be quite painful for them, but let's hope that they step up and increase those at some point in the future, or are obliged to by the government. But if you've got an employer that's paying in more than 5 or 6%, love them, hug them, squeeze them, and thank them a lot, because that is really brilliant.
Love them, hug them, squeeze them. I love that.
Yeah.
What happens if you work beyond 65? Do you still get a state pension? Is it
so that's a question from Russell. Yeah, so Russell, brilliant question, comes up all the time. So you don't have to draw your personal pots until 75. So anytime between 55 and 75, you can draw it whenever you want. Your state pension, and let's just, for everyone that's still on this broadcast, your state pension, you don't get given it, you have to claim it. Now currently we're claiming it at 65, most of us. From October this year it goes up to 66, but we have to claim it. If we don't claim it, the amount that you haven't drawn goes up by a fixed percentage each year. So some people actually defer drawing their state pension and quite like the idea of there being an increase. Be aware of that increase, because for each year that you don't take 9 grand, you've got to make sure that you live long enough to have had the 9 grand that you didn't draw. So having it increase by 5 or 6% as a fixed number each year feels like a big thing, but that's quite a lot of 5 or 6% on top to live beyond where your normal life expectancy might have been to have had the 9 grand that you gave up in year 1. So most people don't defer drawing the state pension, but you have to claim it.
I'll probably say the best question that we've got here.
Come on, is this a geek glasses question?
Well, someone's Imi's asking where you got your tan from. You got a lovely tan. It's fake. It's out of a bottle.
It's not fake.
Makeup before.
I won't deny that. I won't deny that the magnificent team behind the screens did apply a tiny bit of makeup on me. But this is because I've been working from home.
We got forced to, by the way.
I've been working from home, which has meant I've had time to be doing things like running. I do a bit of cycling. I was out cycling at the weekend, and also did a bit of gardening with my wife. So that's where the tan's from. It's not all fake.
Believe it if you will.
Also, I was on holiday last week in North Norfolk and went in the sea, saw the sunset over Old Hunstanton Beach over Skegness, which was beautiful, but went in the sea in September. Who does that in the UK? We do now, because staycation is the thing. Staycation.
Okay, so how many questions have we had? It's been fantastic.
Loads. Okay, let's
got some more here.
Okay.
Let me move.
When will you answer the questions in question section?
Let's do it.
We're just doing those now.
Questions in the question section.
Sorry.
So that was from Giovanni, right. Is there
Okay.
a minimum number of years required in order to be entitled to a state pension? Yeah, Giovanni, we've covered that, is 10. And if so, and if not reached such minimum, can I ask the government for the NI money back? It's a really good idea, Giovanni, but I think you can ask, but I think the answer will be no.
Brilliant. Scott, we've got another one there. Oh no, we've answered that one.
Oh no, Sarah, if I contracted out of SERPs for a few years, oh no, we've covered that one as well.
Yeah.
So let's go.
Let's go back to chat, yeah. Please do write. If we're missing any, do tell us. We'll go back to the chat.
Okay, Nigel, brilliant one. How do I merge 5 different pensions? Same thing, Nigel. But it should be, if you're in the workplace, it should be possible for you to log on, consolidate or transfer in, use that service. There's often a common trading platform behind all the workplace pension providers that means that they're happy to move the monies quickly and electronically. Should you move them? Well, I'm running a session tomorrow called Combining Pension Pots. There's a big question and there are some considerations. So maybe tune in tomorrow. If you can't tune in tomorrow, catch up and see the recorded highlights of combining my pension pots, because there's some big considerations in there as well.
You probably answered this, but I'm going to say it anyway. What about if I want to combine my pension pots, but I've lost them? Have we discussed that?
We haven't discussed that, and it's quite a common question as well. I refer to the pension shoebox of shame. I've put the shoebox on the floor down there. So the pension shoebox of shame is my very kind of cheeky way of saying that we're pretty bad in the UK at recording our pension papers, and we gather them in an environment where here we go, the pension shoebox of shame. Thank you for that, Rick. So here's my pension shoebox of shame. It could be full of years and years and years worth of pension statements and stuff that we don't read. Here's the typical behaviour of someone with their pension statement, which sometimes comes in a large enough envelope to kill a small home pet, right? Most people go like this, open it and go, oh, it's from the pension company. Yeah, I'm not going to look at that. And eventually it will lie on the side for long enough when someone in the house says, why are these papers lying here? And guess where they end up? In that shoebox of shame. So it is tricky for us to stay on top of them. So if you think you've got pension schemes but you're not sure where they are, number one, check all your papers. Number two, it is possible to use the government's pension tracing service. Make sure it's the .gov.uk one, and it allows you to try and track your old pension schemes. Bear with us though, if you've got pension schemes that you haven't found, it is possible to go and search your old employer, it is possible to Google search what's happened to them, and if your final salary scheme was with an old employer that's gone bust, it might be sitting in the Pension Protection Fund, which is a government-run fund. It's worth checking there as well. Johnny, you were going to ask something else?
Okay, we're going to plough through the questions. Let's just go, there's a lot coming in, I don't want to miss any. Should we start with Debbie here?
Debbie, what's the tax rate on workplace pension when I come to draw it? So the tax rate is the same, Debbie, as it is now, but at the moment we're all paying either 32% tax, which is 20% tax and 12% NI, or we're paying 42% tax, which is higher rate tax and 2% NI, or we're paying 47%, which is the super tax beyond £150,000 of earnings. So there's no way of avoiding that because it's flushed through PAYE, through your payroll department, and that's how much tax you pay. In retirement, you don't pay the NI. And so most of us have an ambition to be a basic rate taxpayer only in retirement, so there's no NI. So it drops from 32 to 20. But also don't forget 12.5 grand of income in each person's name is tax-free. So if you wanted to draw pension income of maybe 15 to 20,000 a year, just said it a minute ago, if you draw 20 grand of pension income, the first 12.5 tax-free, 7.5 is taxed at 20%, 20% of 7.5 is 1,500, so you'll have 18,500 net of tax charges. That is such a low tax rate to what we're currently paying in the workplace. It is much, much better, but it is still 20%.
Wow. Okay. Should we go to Catherine?
Catherine, is it worth setting up a pension for my 16-year-old instead of savings? It is possible, and there was some maths came out recently that said that if you start a pension for your newborn baby, paying 3,600 a year into it, i.e. 300 quid a month, with tax relief, so you don't pay 300, you get 20% of it paid by the government, and you did that until that child got to age 18 and then never paid into their pension ever again, because of the power of compound growth, they would have enough money to retire on. Wow. How amazing is that? Wow. So yes, it is possible to do that, but just bear in mind, Catherine, that when you do that, your 16-year-old can't touch that money till they're 55 currently, 57 by the time they get there. So if you want to put money away for your kids, there's a number of ways to do it. You can use children's ISAs, for example, but pension is another vehicle, love it, for grandparents. If they're trying to get money out of their estate, they can give it to your children into a pension scheme, and then they can be happy that your children can't ruin it by getting access to it at 21. They can't touch it till they're 55. So some grandparents like that.
I've got a question.
Go on then.
So Catherine's 16-year-old, will it still be 57 then? Or if she's 16 now, could it be higher?
Let's assume that your 16-year-old at the earliest will be touching a pension at age 57, but it might be at 67, sorry, but it might be as old as 68. And some people said to me the other day, it's the direction of travel set here. Surely the state pension might go as high as 70 one day. I'm not sure it is going to happen anytime soon, but don't rule it out, and maybe not for our generation, but our kids and maybe their kids. Because if we keep living as long as we do, then the government has got to stretch the money that it takes from national insurance and taxation slightly further than it ever had to for generations before that.
Next one, Nigel here. Okay, Rachel.
A couple of questions that have come up a few times. What
Okay.
happens to your pension pot when you die if you are taking drawdown?
Okay, so most of us are going to use something called drawdown. It's a really great question Rachel's just asked from the side there. We don't buy annuities in the UK anymore, mostly since pension freedoms came in, and so most of us might do drawdown. And the question is, what happens to your drawdown pot on death? So I'm going to use me as an example here. I've got a pension pot that's yay big. My wife's got a pension pot that is yay big. When we get to retirement, we're both going to draw from our pots up to 12.5 grand a year, because that is tax-free. So we'll have 25 grand coming into our house tax-free if we both retire today. If I die early, because I haven't committed that pot of money to an annuity, then the remainder of my pot that I haven't drawn is available for my wife to draw, and she's still got the remainder of her pot. If she then dies as well, the remainder of my pot and the remainder of her pot is available to my 2 boys. And that's why we do drawdown. So drawdown allows the unused pot to be going to the benefit of the family. And with proper planning, outside of inheritance tax as well. So it's a really, really smart thing from your family's perspective, that your unused pension pot is still available to them. Sorry, long-winded answer. That's a great question, Rachel.
Brilliant.
Did you say you have a couple more from over there?
Yes. Is it worth topping up your state pension?
So Rachel's just asked, is it worth topping up your state pension? So yeah, possibly is the answer. Again, not being advice, but it is possible for you to do class 4 voluntary contributions to try and bridge a gap in your state pension entitlement. But here's the thing, right? And I don't want to be cynical about this or anti-government, because I'm absolutely neither of those two things naturally. But if the government keeps changing the goalposts on state pensions, necessarily probably diluting the power of them, then if you put some more money into that system, are you certain you're going to get value from it? And I don't know the answer, but I just want you to consider that. Because if you do have cash spare to put towards pension, and you haven't maximised 40 grand per annum into your personal arrangements or workplace schemes, you might get better value putting it into that, especially if you can do it via the workplace, because you'll save national insurance if it's via salary sacrifice. But you then have access to it from 55, 57 coming. You can take tax-free cash from it whenever you want, which you don't do from the state pension, by the way, also. And if you don't use the residual pot, as I just explained, then it goes to your family on death. So whether or not you top up the state pension scheme is a horses for courses thing, I'm not so sure. Horses for courses. I'm not so sure. I would do it personally. Please don't take that as being advice for you.
Yep, just guidance here, no advice. Okay, we've got one from Aaron.
So Aaron said, sorry, not sure if you answered now at the very start, as I missed the first part of Q&A. My predicted pension pot at the age of 60 has a value of 175 with an annuity of 3,600 per year. Can you explain this to me? What does the 175,000 mean? Okay, so Aaron, I kind of was in this sort of space earlier, but I'll quickly cover it. If you've got a pension pot of 175, first things first, give yourself a pat on the back, because that's a chunky sum of money. We're all going to need to build pension pots in that sort of magnitude to get the income that we want in retirement. The second point is, you mentioned an annuity. You don't have to buy an annuity anymore, Aaron. And when you look at those illustrations, the illustrations that they provide you, pretty prescriptive from the pension regulator, often use an annuity vehicle. So we probably aren't going to be using annuities pretty much in retirement anymore. I can't say that as definitive advice, because we're not advising you here. I think most people are going to use drawdown, and so you can draw as much as you want from it. Now that's really important, because in the years when you need more money, you can draw more, and in the years when you need less money, you can draw less. But the money is your pot of cash. You control where the money's invested, so you hope it will still grow. And if you die before you've fully spent the 175 grand, Aaron, it passes on to your family. So the question was, could you explain this to me, and what does the 175,000 mean? Well, the 175,000 means that is your pot of cash. You can have a quarter of it tax-free. The balance beyond 175 is yours to draw income from whenever you want. Annuity could be part of the options, could be part of the solution. And here's my tip to everyone: use free resources. There's loads of options available to you. why don't you use the free resource available to us through the Money and Pension Service scheme, and in particular called Pension Wise. Now, Pension Wise is a free counselling service, not advice, but counselling, information and support service, funded by the government, procured through the Citizen Advice Bureau. We've met them on the tour. They were with us on the tour last year, weren't they, Johnny?
Yep,
they were
yep.
amazing people, and they will give you a guidance session, 45 minutes to an hour, face-to-face, probably telephone, given COVID, or Teams-based, and they'll talk you through all of your options. I would definitely use that opportunity.
We have one here.
Should I take tax-free cash sum before retiring or leave it? What's the best thing to do? So Kathleen, again, touching on a question that came up earlier, just because you can access it at 55 doesn't mean you should. And of course, once you take your 25%, you've had your 25%. So let's just say at 55, you've got 100 grand in your pension pot, you take your 25 grand. You've now moved from an uncrystallised pot, this is terribly, terribly boring and dull pension language, to a crystallised pot. Now that means the remaining 75 grand could still grow, but you can't have any more tax-free cash. Well, look at it the other way around, Kathleen. Let's just say you started with 100 grand and you didn't need the 25% tax-free cash, so you haven't touched it, but the fund's now grown to be 200 grand. You can now have 50 grand tax-free cash, but if you'd accessed it early, you'd still be capped at only 25 grand of the first 100. That's the difference between uncrystallised and crystallised pension pots. And here's my tip to everyone that's still on this broadcast. Just because you can touch your money at 55 doesn't mean that you should. And I saw someone in the workplace the other day who did take hers at 55, but she did it for a reason. She did it to pay off the remainder of her mortgage, and that for her and her husband was a really important thing to do.
Kathleen said thank you for that. Okay, we've got some questions. Rachel, have you got some as well?
Can I transfer some of my pension to my partner to help minimise tax?
Really good question from Rachel just then, which was, can I transfer some of my pension pot to my partner to maximise the tax position? Now, unfortunately, you can't, because we are building up entitlements to the state pension, personal pensions and final salary schemes in our own names, right? So if I've got a way, way bigger pension pot than my wife's, it would be really, really smart if I gave some to her so we could both have 12.5 grand a year in retirement. That would be batting in your favour, not in the government's favour, so that's a no-no. There are very, very rare circumstances where you do transfer some to your partner, and that is pension splitting on divorce. Now, I'm not recommending that you divorce your partner in order to get some of their pension pot in your name, but I wouldn't deny that that does exist, so it would be incorrect of me not to tell you that fact. Don't get divorced just to split your pension, though.
Wow.
It's quite messy.
I've got some questions on here that I'm going to ask you. I think there's one from Nigel. He asked...
Yeah, salary sacrifice seems to be great value. Nigel, yes, let's just talk about salary sacrifice. If you were Rishi Sunak and you were in charge of all the government's finances in the Treasury as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, one of the first things you might look at on the list of things that the government spends money on is tax relief. So it's alleged that the government spends about 50 billion quid a year on tax relief. That's basic rate tax relief to most of us in the workplace, that's high rate tax relief, and that is national insurance costs because people in the workplace use salary sacrifice. So could Rishi Sunak do a raid on that and take it back? People talk about it in the papers all the time. There is a budget coming soon, a budget statement coming soon. Could there be a change to that? I don't think there will be. But salary sacrifice, or SMART as we call it, you'll sometimes see it called salary exchange, is a no-brainer because it means that you don't pay national insurance on the bit of your contribution, so it comes off your gross earnings before tax and NI. So you save 32% as a basic rate taxpayer or 42% as a higher rate taxpayer from the costs of your contribution to pension. People often are fearful that it will reduce their ability to get a mortgage. It doesn't. They're only interested, the lenders now, on your take-home pay. And if you move from non-salary sacrifice to salary sacrifice, your take-home pay goes up. So that's good for buying a house. Secondly, your employer can give a reference in terms of your mortgage application based upon your pre-sacrifice earnings. Second question is, could it impact on my state pension? No, not anymore. 35 years, 9,100, that's dealt with. Third question is, could it impact on some state benefits I'm entitled to? Yes, it could. So there's the area where you might not want to do salary sacrifice, and in particular it has an impact for people who are planning to have children, become pregnant, and it could impact on statutory maternity pay. So salary sacrifice for most people is a no-brainer. We do encounter people in the workplace who steadfastly refuse to do it. I met somebody once who said that I would rather pay the tax to the government. That's the kind of person I am. And I said, knock yourself out. Stay in, don't do salary sacrifice. But most of us, Billy Bonker's not doing it.
Just on salary sacrifice, is higher rate tax relief on contributions automatically claimed back for you by your employer?
Good question. So that's two questions there, salary sacrifice and higher rate tax. So I think the real question from Rachel just then was, does my employer claim back my higher rate tax relief for me? The answer is no. And every time I go into the workplace, I remind higher rate taxpayers that you get basic rate tax relief at source, and this is also true if you are a self-employed person, because I don't want self-employed people to be disenfranchised by this whole thing, and this whole week, by the way. But for every 100 quid you put into a pension, it is collected as 80. So you get 20% tax relief at source. That's what the government commits to. If you are a higher rate taxpayer, you have to claim the difference back. Your employer will never do that for you. Your employer has no mandate to manage your personal taxation affairs. And so as a consequence of that, loads of people haven't claimed it back. And whenever I go into a room where there might be some higher rate taxpayers, I can guarantee at the end of it, one of them will appear at my elbow and tap me there and go at the end, you know that thing about higher rate tax relief? So I did one the other day, before lockdown, it was in March, in a room full of individuals. One of them came up to me at the end and said, I've been paying personally into my pension scheme for the last 12 years and I've never claimed higher rate tax relief, but I've been a higher rate taxpayer for the last 4 years. So I said, I think you are owed this much money. And we did the maths, we showed what his contributions were, and I said, I think you're owed £2,000. And so he was delighted, and so he needed to do two things. He needed to speak to his tax office to claim back some unused years. He needed to make sure that going forward on his tax returns that he recorded it properly, and he needed to make sure that possibly he told his tax office about his future contributions so that it could be adjusted in his tax coding. So rather than 12.5 grand a year being tax free, it goes up if you've got an entitlement to higher rate tax relief. However, that individual changed all of these plans when he realised he should be doing salary sacrifice. So he stopped paying into a private one outside, moved his contributions from a deduction from his salary, and then you get higher rate tax relief at source if you do salary sacrifice, because your contribution, your 100 quid a month, comes off your gross earnings before tax and NI, which means you avoid paying tax at 40% and NI at 2%, so 42% is paid by the government. So for every 100 quid you pay, it only costs you 58. That was quite a mouthful. Thank you for that question, Rachel. Okay, Johnny, how are we doing?
We've still got loads of questions. What we're going to do here? Should we?
I've got another question from Neil, who wants to know if you're paying into a workplace pension and your company happens to go bust, what safeguards are there?
Okay, so Neil's asked the question: if you're paying into a workplace pension scheme and your company goes bust, what happens? So a couple of things. First of all, if you're in a final salary scheme, then your final salary scheme's health is dotted line related to the balance sheet health of your business. And if your business goes bust, then it could have an impact on your final salary scheme. Thankfully, the government spotted this some years ago after some tragic cases where people lost all their final salary pensions, and they set up the Pension Protection Fund. Now, the Pension Protection Fund picks up those final salary schemes and puts them into one big scheme run by the government, and it guarantees 90%. There are some variations, but let's use an average of 90% of what you're entitled to. And 90% of something is better than 100% of nothing. And so the fact that the PPF picks that up is brilliant. It's funded by all the other final salary pension schemes using a PPF levy. So that's good for you in those circumstances. If yours isn't a final salary scheme, then remember when I talked about the three types of pensions: promise from the government, that's state pension; final salary, just touched on that. The last type is DC, defined contribution. That money is like a bank account. Brackets, can't touch it till you're 55, close brackets. But your business has no relationship to that money whatsoever. So if the business goes bust, that pot of cash is yours. It's actually held outside of the business, normally with an insurer like some of our lovely supporters, Now Pensions, Aegon, Royal London and beyond. And it's your relationship with them. So the final answer to that bit of the question is, what happens if one of those guys goes bust, Now, Royal London or Aegon? Then the government has something called the Financial Services Compensation Scheme, which picks up the majority of cases where a provider implodes. Haven't seen one of those in my working life, and this amount of grey hair will tell you that's quite a long time. So the Financial Services Compensation Scheme is a good crutch for us all, but I've not seen it deployed.
Can I just say as well, if you go onto the video library on our digital platform, Pension Awareness Live platform, the PPF, I've got some videos on there, and it tells you in more detail what they do and more information about that. So definitely recommend watching them.
I can see another comment here by Rabbi, which was, what do you consider in your expertise as a good pension pot as of today? So I've got another prop later on that they're going to throw at me from the side in a session called how much do I need to pay in, and how much will I get, and how much will I need? And so, and that bit of prop is some string. because I don't know how much you need as a decent amount of income in retirement, because it's different to all of us in this studio here today. And by the way, just for anyone who's worried, there are less than 6 of us in this room, so we're all nice and safe. But I don't know, okay? And so when we go into the workplace, I often say to people, what do you think your target income is? And the answer is dependent upon what I'm going to get, what my partner's going to get, what other outgoings we've got, whether the mortgage is cleared, whether the kids have properly sodded off, and whether or not we've inherited money. But as a general rule, okay, I would say we are looking to get to 100 grand plus in our pension pots, because that's going to give us the ability to top our state pension up to 12.5 grand, and so the whole lot is paid out to you tax-free. Okay, that would be my ambition. If I was able to live on 15 grand a year in retirement, or 12.5 grand a year in retirement, is to have a pension fund on top of my state pension pot of 9,100, a pension pot of about 100 grand, because that would give me enough income to top me up to the 12.5. And then my entire pension output, no taxation. Brilliant.
Any more questions, guys? We're going to wrap this up now. We're coming.
A couple of questions on how much should I be saving, but we have got another session on that, haven't we?
Yeah.
Well, let me just quickly do it before we wrap up, Rachel. Rachel's just asked, loads of people are asking how much should I be saving. Right, I'll go back through the 4 answers. 1, as much as you need to get the maximum from your employer. Okay, that. 2, as much as you can afford. Don't kill yourself though, because there's no point living on beans on toast today and having a huge pension pot later on, because beans on toast every day of the week will get a bit, boring and possibly a bit lively. And number 3 is probably half your age as a percentage of earnings. So if you're below 30, I would use that rule. So half your age times your earnings as a percentage. But here's the real answer. I think it's around 14 or 15% per annum combined, your bit plus the government's plus your employer's bit. Okay, and the point I made earlier in the presentation is don't beat yourself up if you can't get there yet, but have it as an ambition to work towards, because as I said earlier, we don't get people with pension remorse other than at retirement saying, I wish I'd put more in. And there are lots and lots and lots of people who are putting in the 4% that their employers asked them to do in order to get 6% from their employer, but didn't realise that they could pay more than 4% in themselves. And when I see them, they go, I didn't know I could pay more in. Yes, you can. Okay, so Rachel's just asked about what's the difference between an NHS pension and a normal pension. So if you saw the early part of the broadcast where I talked about defined benefit contributions, I was actually thinking about the NHS at the time. So the NHS pension, there's a couple of things about it. First of all, it's a defined benefit. You know what you're going to get, so it's got a guarantee built into it. Secondly, it's an unfunded scheme. So we, as taxpayers in this room, are paying for the NHS pension scheme, and I don't begrudge a single penny of my taxation that goes towards the NHS, because God help them and love them and hug them and squeeze them, but they've had a tough year and they're probably not appreciated as much as they should be. So thank you, NHS. But lastly, it differs because the guarantee is worked out like this. Each year of service you work counts as an 80th of whatever your final salary determined number is. So if your final salary there is 40 grand and you can work for 40 years, you get 40 80ths, 50% of 40 grand is 20 grand a year for life. Very different, the NHS pension scheme, funded a little bit by you, funded a lot by the government and us as taxpayers, and you get some tax relief on your contributions, of course, because we all do on our pensions, but you've got to love and hug and squeeze that. And last year on the Pensions Awareness Day tour in Newcastle High Street, a doctor approached me and said, I'm hearing bad stuff about the NHS pension, I think I'm going to step out of it. And 20 minutes later, after I'd bent his ear for 20 minutes, I said, absolutely never leave the NHS pension scheme. And he said, I'm going back to my crew room to tell all my mates that all the negative stuff we've been reading about the NHS pension scheme pales into insignificance about how poor a pension we would all have if we tried to build the similar promise privately. And it would be very difficult. So NHS pension scheme, very different, love it.
Wow. I mean, I've really enjoyed it. You've had some fantastic comments, James. People have really found it engaging. I'm sorry to all the people who we haven't answered the questions. After this, we'll have a look through, and if there's any that we haven't answered, we'll answer them in the next webinars.
We'll put them on the FAQ.
And we'll put them on the FAQ page. So I hope it's been helpful. We've really loved being able to speak to you. We've loved the interaction. I mean, I'm so excited about the questions we've got.
That last hour has gone like that, so thank you for making
brilliant.
an hour of my life on pensions go so quickly. Everyone thinks pensions are boring. They're not. They're exciting. Come on, bring it on. Tell your friends, get involved. We had 600 people potentially log on for this session. Let's get to 1,000 for the next one. Tell everyone, get them logging in.
James will be signing autographs as he leaves the studio later about pensions. Pension statements he'll be, be signing. Well, guys...
And if you miss it, you can catch up, remember?
Yeah, catch up.
Yeah, catch up. You can go to the video library. We'll be putting these on the video library on the website. I saw Julie, she was having trouble with the website. If you do have trouble, you can refresh the link. We've done some updates lately, but if you do refresh it, it should upload and be perfect.
Look what Neil's written. Pension Geeks, simply the best. Dan, dan, dan. Oh,
Don't
if I had music,
started.
I'm going to go into
Don't
Tina
get-
Turner.
We're wrapping up now, come on. Right, we're wrapping up. Guys,
Thank you all. See you at the
thank
next
you.
one.
See you soon, bye.